right, Dylan. So you and I are going to spend our time today talking about your ongoing case. But before we get into that, I actually want to make sure people have a sense of your background, sort of you personally and professionally coming to this story. Can you talk about your career a little bit pre-Freight Essentials?
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you having me on today, Kelly. I look forward to speaking with your audience and having all of them see what you and I are going to talk about today. So, prior to my career with Freight Essentials, kind of a little bit of backstory about myself. I grew up in Kansas City for 27 years, so from the Midwest, and through my time there, I went to high school there, went to college there. So went to the University of Kansas and played college football at the University of Kansas. So I was there for 4 years, had a great experience there. My degree was in sports management and a minor in business. And so really when I was at the University of Kansas, I was more focused on, being a college athlete, going to school. I love school. I love learning. And so I was actually valedictorian of my class at the University of Kansas, did the commencement speech. And so did that whole thing. After that, I became a strength and conditioning coach. That's really what I thought I wanted to get into. When you're kind of engulfed in that space of college athletics, I think sometimes it's a positive and also a negative, that you don't always get to do all the internships and stuff that maybe a normal college student does in the summertime to kind of advance your career. But for me, I had a great mentor in college. His name was Scott Holsopple. He was our strength and conditioning coach. And so that's really the career path I thought I wanted to get into. So once I got done with school, I took all the certifications, the NSCA and all these different certifications to be a strength coach. I was a strength coach for a few years and just I love working out. I still work out to this day. I own a gym. So, I still have that love for it. But after doing that for a few years, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this my entire life. So I got a job at Kansas State University doing nutritional research for the government. And during that time, I was able to get my MBA classes paid for as an employee of Kansas State University. So if you're not familiar with Kansas, KU and KC are kind of rivals. So it's almost funny that I played football at one and I was a rival against them. And then I did my MBA classes there and worked for them. So I did that. And then after I got done with that, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. I think I was more lost than when I started. And so I started applying for a lot of different random jobs, of being a police officer to recruiting firms, and ended up working at Freight Quote by C.H. Robinson. So C.H. Robinson, prior to me coming in, had acquired Freight Quote from a gentleman in Kansas City for like $455 million. Freight Quote, their claim to fame is they were one of the first people to be able to do online freight quotes, hence freightquote.com. So they had a kind of TMS platform, essentially a tech company that grew, and he started it from his basement with a few buddies. And so I worked there for 3 years. And after working there and learning the ropes, I figured out I was not a good W-2 employee. I learned how to sell. They taught me a lot of great things. But, I had a problem showing up for work on time and always listening and stuff like that. Worked very hard and did well, but left there. And that's when I started at Global Trans in January of 2020. And that's really where Freight Essentials spawned, per se, was at our time at Global Trans. So that's kind of my life leading up to Global Trans. We can dive into any more of it in particular if you want, but
Absolutely. No, I think there's probably a lot of people listening in that appreciate the idea of being an incredibly hard worker, but not a W-2 employee. I've been self-employed for a long time now. I always say to people, I am no longer crate trained. I don't think you could put me back in the box. So you got to find the right environment for somebody to be successful in. And as people are going to hear, all of that time that you spent, not just getting your MBA, but strength training, and I would suggest toughness training goes hand in hand with that, is actually preparing you very well to handle the story that people are going to hear today. Before we get into the details of that, and I have a reason for doing this up front, because we're going to go into sharing a story, talking about impact, talking about sort of bigger picture of what you're going through right now. When you and I first talked about it, my first thought was, why is he willing to talk about this? And I know I'm not the first show in supply chain you've spoken with. I actually think that's a great thing. You should be out there talking to as many people who are willing to listen and amplify the message and carry on the conversation. But because that was my first question, I want to start there. We're going to go into all the nitty-gritty detail, but at the core of what we're going to talk about today, why is it so important to you to be transparent, to be outspoken, and to make sure everybody has all of the information about what's happening?
100%. No, I think that's a great question, and thank you for starting it off with that. I think your audience will appreciate it as well. So, why I've been willing to be so open, you and I, the first time we talked, you mentioned that, with the other RICO case with the woman who filed against FedEx and many other lawsuits, people are so sealed-lipped. They don't want to talk, and maybe it could be advice from their legal team, etc. When we decided to file the RICO lawsuit, because I actually have two separate lawsuits. I filed one September 2023. That's a year and a half in the making. It's been great. Then we have the RICO lawsuit. But when I decided to file the RICO lawsuit, I got an attorney by the name of Rodney Dunn. And so he's out of Texas. He's one of the best attorneys in the country. He's won massive verdicts all over the world, $80+ million verdicts, etc. And so he does a lot of PR, and he's a fan of PR. And so he's not afraid to have a client who speaks about it. And me personally, the reason I'm okay speaking about it is because everything we're speaking about is the truth. I have all of the evidence. We had a lot of evidence before we got terminated. And then through the ESI protocol, which we talked about on Freight Caviar, what ESI means, but through that protocol, we got millions of pages of documents. And so, of course, we can't share all of those publicly because there's a protective order in place that they have overuse and overabuse, which we'll get into. But we have millions of pages of documents, and we have about 1,400 what I would consider hot documents. And because of that, I know what I'm saying is factually true. And if it wasn't true, my defendants, who will tell you time and time again they're a multi-billion-dollar company and Dylan, we have more resources than you, they would have hit me with defamation. They would have hit me with TROs. They would have done all sorts of things in their legal toolbox, per se, to try to shut me up. If anything I was saying was false. But why I'm so confident in talking to yourself and other people, I've been invited to speak at some conferences as a keynote speaker, etc., is because I know what we're saying is 100% true. There's no lies. I have no hidden past. I'm not a criminal. There's nothing you can find out about me. I'm just a guy from Kansas City who's a hardworking American with a family, with a young child that I'm trying to provide for, and show her really that you need to be transparent in life. And if someone wrongs you, the reason this continues to happen is this perpetual thing in the agent model. And really, as I continue to learn more in the transportation industry as a whole, no one's willing to speak out. And so it's like Stockholm syndrome that, why someone stays in an abusive relationship, because they try to justify why it's happening to them, or they're scared to speak because, they're a $5 billion company. They, want to do death by legal fees. So that's why I want to speak out, for one, because I know nothing I'm saying is false. And two, there's too many people who've not had a voice. And if you don't speak out and fight back against this stuff, no one's ever going to be able to. So that's where my key reason for why I'm okay speaking about it. And until I can't speak about it anymore, whether that's if they settle or we go to court and there's no reason to speak about it, I'll continue talking about it till that day comes.
And you mentioned the agent model. That's actually absolutely where we're going to start today.
Yep.
For anybody that isn't familiar with it, how does the freight agent model work?
Yeah, so you kind of have your W-2 employee, which a lot of people really know what that is. You work for TQL, you work for C.H. Robinson. I started off as, W-2 employee. I think with the agent model, not a lot of people go into the agent model who have no freight experience. I probably wouldn't highly recommend it because in most of the agent models, there's not a lot of help. But a lot of times, I think the agent model is problematic because they're kind of preying on W-2 employees. So they sell you this pipe dream that you're an entrepreneur. If you get on Global Trans or Worldwide Express's recruiting page right now, or if you talk to a Global Trans recruiter, they're going to sell you on this pipe dream that you're your own business. You can expand as much as you want. You can hire your employees. All the customers, I think this is important, all the customers are your customers. And, that they're there to be a partner for you. And with Global Trans in particular, they have inside agents and then they have outside agents. So the inside agents, they give a little bit more support too, but you get a lesser commissionable split. And when we talk about commissionable splits, if there's 100% of profit, at play, I had a 70-30 split per se. So I got 70% of the profits, they got 30. I was an outside agent coming from C.H. Robinson. I got some great training by my manager at the time, Clayton Hold'em, shout out to him. And so I was an outside agent, had the 70-30 split. They really did nothing operationally for us. So I was in charge of getting all the customers, bringing all the customers, doing all the daily operations, making sure bills got paid, if I had to do collections, A to Z. The inside agents, they might be on like a 45-55 split or 50-50, whatever they negotiate for themselves. But Global Trans was the one covering their trucks, doing more of the operational stuff. So maybe an inside agent might mirror a little bit more of a W-2, but from the agent model as a whole, if you go to talk to any recruiter today, that's what it's supposed to be. And really, one might ask, well, why would someone be an agent? And so when I started, I didn't have some massive company. It ended up growing into that. And a lot of people, when you start as an agency, you don't start off as a massive thing. So you're not thinking on down the line. But really the big benefits when we start to drill down at the agent program is you're using their MC number. So you're using the Global Trans MC number, and then they are essentially a glorified factoring company, because after we left there, we got our own MC. I have a great factoring partner, etc. And so I started to learn the intricacies of this, and what they're really disguising themselves as is a factoring partner with a TMS system and some LTL rates. And if you really boil it down, that's what it is. But for anyone who doesn't know, that's what kind of the agent program is. That's what they market to you. And as we found out, that's not really where their true intentions lie. They have a very hidden agenda, at least with Global Trans and Worldwide Express.
So we're definitely starting to get into some of the players here. So you as Freight Essentials are the agent, and you're working with, it's three companies that we're talking about, right? It's Worldwide Express, it's Global Trans, and it's Unitopco Holdings, and they're the brokerage, correct?
Yeah. So when I started with them in 2020, it was just Global Trans. So my contract, I never signed a contract with Worldwide Express, which we can get into all of that. Should they have had access to our system and our customers? And I don't believe so. But I signed a contract with Global Trans. They had a pretty decent reputation, and I've learned that they weren't perfect, but they were decent. People were happy. They really thought the agents were the shining star. And I've said it all along, and I think their thought before WEX came into play was true, that the agents are really the customers of Global Trans. If you don't have agents, you have no revenue, you have no profits, because you're on a profit share program with each other. It's really when Worldwide Express came into the picture in July 2021, and they did that through what we call a levered buyout. And typically why someone does a levered buyout is if you're going to plan to IPO in a few years, you use someone else's debt to buy a company at a greatly reduced rate, and then you leverage that capital so then you can go IPO, you sell, and you make a bunch of money. Tom Medine and other C-level executives wanted to say that it was a merger, but for two companies in the logistics space that big to merge, you'd have to file with the SEC. There would be paperwork, Kelly, that you and I could find. It's nowhere to be found. So they wanted to market it as a merger and really, lie to people or misconstrue the truth when really it was an acquisition or an LBO. And so that's when it became, this whole WEX Uni deal, because Worldwide Express and Unishippers, which were two different competing brands, they came together in like 2017, I believe. And then they brought on Global Trans in 2021, which was a vast competitor to them. And then even once they came on board, still to this day, they keep them kind of separated. You have Unishippers, you have Global Trans, and you have Worldwide Express. They look like different brands, but that's kind of the whole makeup of the situation.
So it's when Worldwide Express and Global Trans came together that things started to go sideways. When did you first realize that something wasn't working the way that you had expected it to?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, they came together in 2021, and there really wasn't a whole lot of bad per se. The biggest issue with Global Trans was honestly the technology system, where their TMS kept going down all the time. If you talk to any agent who was there, I wasn't there in 2018, 2019, but they said the same thing was true. 2018 to 2021, the tech system kept going down. So they came in, they kind of fixed that issue. So in my mind, I'm like, man, these Worldwide Express people, they're great. They fixed the tech problem. That's my biggest complaint. And then Rob Rose, who was the president of Worldwide Express, he oversaw the Global Trans brand when he was still alive. In October 2022, I believe he passed away of a heart attack. And so he was no longer in the picture. So in that time frame, and that's how when they did their NASCAR sponsorship, et cetera, and I think Rob was a big NASCAR guy. So honestly, he wasn't really too involved with the agents. So nothing, at least from the outside perspective, had changed. And then the day after he died, it was October. I was out in San Francisco with my family. I took my parents to see a 49ers game because we're big Chiefs fans. Go Chiefs. And so a guy named Joel Klum calls me. And he's the COO still to this day of Worldwide Express. He said, hey, I know Rob passed away. It's a very tragic situation. I'm here. I'm going to be much more communicative than Rob was. I know he was kind of focused on the NASCAR thing. So Joel automatically, implements himself as this great guy. And he's a bit more of an extroverted individual. So, he tries to be your best friend. He tells you what you want to hear type of guy. And of course, I'm in the sales role, so I expect that. But, come to find out, it goes very downhill from there. But so really for that first month or so, not a lot changes. Well, then they try to implement what they want to do is like this parcel pilot program. So Worldwide Express's claim to fame, and kind of same with Unishippers, is they have what's called UPS DAP rates. So they sell small parcel, like the small packages you get. They're not a big player when it comes to LTO and full truckload, which is also a reason I believe they wanted to LBO or, combined with Global Trans, because Global Trans was much more heavy on the full truckload, very proficient, good system. And if Worldwide Express wanted to IPO, be a serious player, they needed that. So to the top 5 agents, and at that point, I was like the second largest agent out of 600 to 800, they approached us and said, hey, the top 5 agencies, we want to do this small parcel pilot program with you guys. We won't charge you the franchise fee, and we want you to come over because my book of business was identified as like the best book of business in Global Trans in order for the pilot parcel program. And so that's when in December they sent us this thing with all of our customer lists on it, which I had not approved them to pull. And that was kind of the first thing that my business partner, Natasha, that was the first time that I kind of rubbed her the wrong way. Like, who gave you access, in order to go pull our customer list? Come to find out, they had done this months prior after talking with other agents. So they pulled it without any of us knowing, scrubbing stuff, etc. But they send this to us and they said, hey, can you fill this out? So that was kind of their first time of trying to get us to legitimately give them our customer list, which they're still saying. I got emails that say they're our customers. So that was kind of the first time. We had some billing issues with one of our largest customers, Redcon One, who's actually in the RICO lawsuit as well. Funny enough, about a week and a half ago, Redcon sued Worldwide Express, which we can get into. But that was kind of the first time that we're like, man, this seems a bit odd. So they fly us down to Dallas, Natasha and I, in December 2022. That's the first time that we really got in front of all their C-level executives heavily. We had a private meeting with them, talked about us selling the company to them, at a certain point once we continue to grow. And they were really starting to pick our brains because probably 85% of my book was full truckload. And then we did a lot of LTL, just kind of came with it. And they were asking us, what's the importance of full truckload? Why do you need proof of deliveries? And at that point, I'm like, man, these people really don't understand, for one, the agent model. They have no clue about it. They purchased something that they did no research on. And two, they don't understand full truckload. And so that's when we really started to kind of have our alarms or our pointers go off and say, man, something just doesn't feel right. And then in the weeks and months to come, it just becoming thing after thing after thing. So that's kind of, the timeline of that.
Yeah. Now, there's actually a piece of that I think is really important here that I want to make sure we go back and clarify. You kind of teased earlier that we would be talking about the idea of who owns customers under the agent model. So there's the difference between legal ownership of that book of business that you've spoken about, and then physically being in possession, or let's say digitally being in possession of a list of customers.
Correct.
When it comes down to value, under the agent model, who did you believe owned that book of business? Literally owned versus being in possession of the customer list.
So who owned that book of business is the agents, and that's what they market it to you as. And I've talked to the president of Priority One. I've talked to many other people since, I've gone public, and I ask all them, with your agent models, who owns the customers? And they say, well, the agent owns the customers. No one's ever been like, oh, the agent doesn't own the customers, they're our customers. Well, Charlene York, who's the chief legal officer of Worldwide Express, she'll try to tell you that they are their customers. But in your contract, there's a first right of refusal. Of that, if someone wanted to buy your book of business, they had first right of refusal to buy your book of business.
Sure.
Well, if they're not my customers, what are you buying?
Right.
And so I had a conversation with Mike Sutter, who was the former VP of agent development for Global Trans. He's also personally sued because in a RICO lawsuit, you can pierce the corporate structure. But Mike Sutter is personally sued. And so I had a conversation with him several months ago. He called me, we had a conversation, and probably trying to save himself a little bit. But he had a conversation that, he agreed that the agents, the customers were the agent's customers. So if you look at that contract and there's a first right of refusal for purchase, what are you buying if you're not buying the customers? Well, Charlene York had told him, well, we're buying the operations. Well, here's an interesting scenario. I had 25 people who worked for me personally, who worked for Freight Essentials. I still do to this day. But there was agents they bought out who had one operational person, who had 0 operational people. So when you want to make up this fictitious lie of what you're buying is the operation and not the customers, what happens when you're buying an agent who has no operations people, who's literally working in their home office, and they sell you their book of business? What are you buying them? Are you buying dust in the air? That's a popular word they like to call, which we can get into. No, you're not doing that. You're buying the customer list, or those customers from that agent. And so her premise, from what Mike told me, like I said, he was the former vice president of Global Trans, is, well, because they have the accounts receivable is why she wants to claim legally they are their customers. Well, here's a nice analogy, because I love analogies. So when we got our own MC number, we have a factoring company, and there's factoring companies all over the freight industry. And so if you decide maybe you want to run the customer yourself because they're a great paying customer, maybe that customer needs some longer net terms. So your factoring company will, basically buy the receivables. The customer pays them directly to their bank account, but that factoring company would never claim that's their customers. Once you decide not to factor any more invoices with that factoring company, they give you a notice of release that now that customer is free to pay you direct to your Chase bank account or whoever you bank with.
Okay.
So her sole legalese of why she believes they are their customers, which she's just trying to spitball and backtrack now. And I honestly believe they bought a company they did not truly understand. Because they had all W-2 employees or franchisees with Worldwide Express and unit shippers, and a franchisee model is very different than an agent model. And so maybe in those scenarios, that's what they were buying, because franchisees contract, it's governed by the federal government. You have FTD filings. It's a whole shenanigans. But with agents, it's not that way. So long story, I gave you the long version of it, but the customers are the agents. And if you go talk to any person who owns an agency and you try to tell them, hey, just so you know, those customers are not your customers. I just had a conversation the other day with one of the top 5 agents. And I asked them, I said, do you think it's your customers? And they do $20-30 million of business through Global Trans right now. And they said, of course they're your customers. And I gave them a little insight. Well, that's not, if you ever get into a legal dispute, that's not what they're going to, and the look on their face was one of shock. What do you mean that they're not our customers? So yes, it's a very interesting area to get into.
Yeah. And this is where it ends up being relevant that you're speaking out now. So this case is working its way through. Before we're done today, we're going to talk about sort of where is it now? Where are you going? But you said shenanigans just now. More formally, you filed a RICO lawsuit. Now, I think when most people think about RICO lawsuits, they think the mafia, right? They're not necessarily thinking about business. They're not necessarily thinking about what's going on in the freight industry. Why did it end up being that RICO was the most appropriate statute for you to file these charges under?
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, most people, they think of RICO, they think of racketeering, they think of the mob. Yeah. And it used to be just a criminal statute. Well, now in most states, you can file it civilly or you can file it criminally. And so we had our first lawsuit September 2023. We filed that. Now, essentially, they sort of purchased our business. In that lawsuit, we also get into, it's on its 3rd amendment petition. There'll probably be a 4th amendment petition soon. That's actually what the hearing next Friday is about. With the RICO lawsuit, I said the reason we ended up filing that was through the state lawsuit. We ended up finding a lot of information. And so originally, we thought it looked like RICO, but we weren't 100% sure. And so as we started to learn more and more and more, we said, man, this really feels like RICO. And my business partner, Natasha, she had kind of a legal background before this. And she kept saying, hey, I think RICO, I think this is RICO. And so as we started to get these millions of pages of documents, we decided this is an actual enterprise and you can file a civil RICO charge, which a lot of times gets picked up, criminally. And then we also saw a lawsuit that was massively important, and that was the Flying J case. And so the Flying J case happened in 2013, 2014. I know we talked about that in our conversation prior. And so what thing about that case is CVC Capital, who is actually the one who made the combination happen between Worldwide Express and Global Trans. They had a 20% ownership in Flying J during that RICO lawsuit. They ended up getting rid of their position after it. They settled that case for about $40 million within 3 months. And so CVC is all too familiar with RICO lawsuits. And so you started to read that lawsuit, and what that lawsuit premise was about in 2013, 2014 was that Flying J was giving fuel discounts to trucking companies if they bought so much gasoline. It makes sense. Well, they were overinflating the fuel price to the trucking companies. So when they showed them this discount, it wasn't really a discount. So we saw that. Obviously, there was that FedEx one. And really all RICO is, it's just a criminal enterprise. It's a racketeering organization where it has multiple different people acting on this bad behavior or this bad act. And so that's why you see in our RICO lawsuit, you have Worldwide Express, you have Global Trans, you have Unitopco Holdings, which is kind of like the company above them that holds them.
Sure.
Then you also have personal people who were sued. So Joel Klum, the COO, Jack Pearlstein, the CFO, Mike Sutter, the former VP of agent development, and then two of our customers who also participated in this racketeering behavior, Global Trans, or actually Worldwide Express, gave my customer Redcon One, who was our largest customer. It was the largest customer in the entire Global Trans network. So it just wasn't my largest customer, it was one of their largest for the agent model. They gave them a $1.6 million credit in excess, and then got them into a 3-year exclusivity contract for their freight and their parcel. But they didn't keep it in the Global Trans brand. They moved it over to a girl named Gina, who's a very bad actor as well, Gina Arcadius. They moved it over to her name on the Worldwide Express side. So they did that. So they all kind of colluded together. And then they did a similar thing with a customer, a gentleman named Dominic Iocavone. He owns some very popular brands. He was on the Inc. 5000 this past year for the 7th fastest growing company in America, privately held. He owns a company called Raw, Revive, Bum Energy, and Vaughn's Treats, massive brand. And so they gave him in excess of $100,000 credit, and then told him to stop working with me, stop talking to me, etc. What was unique about that situation is I had a 10-year exclusivity contract with him for all 4 of his companies, first right of refusal for any company that he came out with. And he had actually approached me with that earlier in 2023 because he had been referred to me, hey, I know so many supplement companies work with you. I hear you're the guy to work with. We're going into Sam's Club and Costco and all these places. We want to work with you. They did the contract, we signed it, and then Worldwide Express came in with no legal premise, no legalese, and said, hey, Dylan's a bad guy. You should stop talking to him, stop working with him. He was overcharging people, which we weren't, we can get into. And so he broke his 10-year contract with me, which we actually have a separate lawsuit against him in the state of Florida. So that's why it kind of became a RICO lawsuit because there was multiple bad actors acting all together as essentially a criminal organization against us.
Yeah. Now, have any other companies publicly joined you in your suit? I know you mentioned, for instance, Redcon One has sort of a parallel suit, still under RICO, but parallel, if I understood that correctly. Have any other agents joined you in your suit?
Yeah, so since we came out, we've had about 100 different agents reach out to us, both inside agents, outside agents, some people who used to be there, people who transitioned their business away, some W-2 employees, et cetera. And so the biggest thing, that we've talked about and, why it continues to happen is people are afraid to speak out. Because they're afraid if they speak out, they're going to be retaliated against, their customers are going to be stolen from them, they're going to lose their livelihood. A lot of them have 20, 30, 40 employees that they're not just responsible for themselves. And so this is why this issue continues to perpetuate itself, is because of that. So we actually have, it'll be coming out hopefully in the next few weeks, we have 2 people who are going to be joining the lawsuit. They've decided to be brave enough and endure what might come their way, but they believe that they have also been wronged, and they want to stand up, and they've decided that enough is enough, and if more people don't speak out, then this will continue to happen. So yeah, we have people who want to join the lawsuit. Lots of people who are very interested. Like I said, this other agency I talked to who's very large, they're trying to put a plan together that they can do that and stand up against these people as well. But like I said, people are in a very precarious situation because they don't just have to think about themselves. They have to think about their employees, their families, et cetera. So, but yeah, when those 2 come out, I will definitely get on another quick show like you mentioned, because it's going to be big news when we drop that. I don't think the defendants are going to be very happy about it.
Yeah. And part of why I think this is why we spent some time on the agent model, part of what creates this situation is the difference in size between Global Trans, Worldwide Express, right? And all of the agents, even the largest agents like Freight Essentials. When you have that disparity in size between companies, it creates a difference in how they engage in conversations, in negotiations. Yes. I'd be curious to know if you've had any public response from the defendants to date.
No. So, like I said, the biggest thing is they have not tried to sue us. They have not hit us with defamation, anything like that, because everything I'm saying is true information publicly. And it would look very bad upon them if they tried to file a defamation lawsuit against me and then it came out that it was all true. So they have not done that. I think they had one article they responded to, which the article was false. And we made sure that we corrected that. We reached out to that company that wrote that article. And it was like their marketing person who responded to it. Why you have your marketing person respond to a PR article? Why is, not the chief legal officer, the CEO, the COO responding? Very interesting. You can have your own thought about that. But other than that, they've said nothing about it. It took about 8 days. So we filed it, I believe, if I remember correctly, on December 12th. It took them 8 days. That was a Thursday. So the following Friday, they finally responded to all their agents. I had some agents, call me and let me know what was said. So they sent out this little short email to the agents, letting them know that, Dylan's filing a lawsuit against us. It's all baseless. He's throwing dust in the air. He's just an upset, disgruntled agent. And that's been their only thing to the agent, which I think almost made it worse for them. Because after that, I got more LinkedIn requests. I got more people calling me, more people interested. Because let's say they have 500 agents. I think at that time, maybe only 200 of them knew it was even going on. But then you send out this public statement that, it was like a non-denial type of statement. Like, throwing smoke in the air. Like, oh, we didn't do anything wrong. And so I don't think anyone believed in it. Probably made their situation worse. And if that statement that they tried to put up to all their agents was true, then why are you trying to file this Rule 76A in Texas to seal the case? Because in my state lawsuit, I have 79 pieces of evidence that are currently redacted because of the confidentiality or protective order. If everything's baseless and we're just throwing dust in the air like LeBron James before a basketball game with his chalk, then why are you trying to file a motion to seal? Just release it publicly, let the public decide. But what's in these documents is the money that they were fraudulently making, emails with the CFOs, CEOs, COOs, stuff that they don't want to be seen because it's the smoking gun per se, So that's a little bit about that.
So what's the current status of the case today? So January 31st, you and I are sitting down and recording this. As of today, what's the current state of the case?
Yep. So next Friday, we have a big hearing, and that's over the motion to seal. And if the Judge Fraser, she's been a great judge, and she's the judge in our state court lawsuit, the one that we filed in 2023. So that's where, like I said, that's where it all started. That's where we got all this evidence from. We had a lot of evidence ourselves before, we got terminated illegitimately, but we got evidence through that case. And through that protective order, that's where we had to agree of what was confidential, what was AEO, which is attorney's eyes only if someone doesn't know. But when you label documents like that, it has to fit a certain definition that we agreed to. They've overused and overabused that typical corporate game plan. And so that's what we're fighting next week to get all that stuff, publicly shared, which they don't want. So that's kind of the next big step. And then, so that's the state lawsuit. And then we'll start doing depositions and all those types of things. And then the RICO lawsuit, all the people got served. And so with that lawsuit, they'll probably try to file something. We have a great team. And then, from that point, if we add some more people to that, which is the game plan over the next 2 weeks, then they're going to have to deal with that. So that's kind of where the two lawsuits sit currently. Okay. And there will be some probably other stuff that spawns off of that.
Do you have an ideal outcome in mind? Like if you could wave a magic wand and make this all work out the way that you would be fully satisfied, what would that outcome be?
Yeah, of course. I think that's a great question. So I think that's a two-pronged approach. So originally when we first filed this, they should have been able to buy our business. And that's what the talks we'd had with them about. Now, I don't agree how they wanted to buy businesses. Tom Bedine wanted to buy businesses at a drastically undervalued piece, which I told him I didn't agree with, which was probably also some of the reason they knew I would never sell to them for the amount of money they wanted to. But when we initially filed, it was, you should have bought my business. Really, something we didn't touch on yet is with the agent-principal relationship. It's really more indicative of a partnership. They want to try to market it as this agent-principal relationship because there's some fiduciary duty components, but it's really more of a partnership and something that we're actually arguing in our lawsuit. And if that was to be deemed true, the whole agent model would literally just be flipped on its head because these aren't agent-principal relationships and who has a fiduciary duty to who. It's actually a business partnership because in the partnership, you share the losses and you share the profits. Well, we were definitely sharing the profit. That's, no one can, defend that. or not say that's true, but it's really the losses. And how they structured their deal with their bad debt fund, et cetera, which is talked about in the RICO complaint, is we were almost eating all the losses, and they were double, triple dipping and taking from the losses. And so really it's very indicative of a partnership. And in the state of Texas, if we would have been a partner, if you want to get rid of your partner, as they illegitimately got rid of me, they would need to buy me out. And at that time in the logistics industry, you can sell for 5 to 8 times EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, and appreciation, if someone's not aware of that. And some of the companies will pay up to even 10 times EBITDA if you have a well-established organization like mine was, with a great back office support, et cetera. So originally the whole goal was, you should have bought my business. You literally took some of our biggest clients. You racketeered against us. You offered them bribes. You got them into contracts. You took that business from us that I can never get back. And we were doing $30 to $40 million of revenue a year with, good profits. And obviously they were able to see those profits because we were sharing the profits. So originally the goal was, to go after the amount of money that, we were wronged, for myself, my company, my family, et cetera. And then at that point we could have decided, do we want to build another business, which lots of people do. You see it in all sorts of different industries, from CPG brands to logistics companies. You build one, you sell it, you do it again because you just enjoy the business, you enjoy the hunt like I do. I'm not someone who could just sit still forever and not do anything ever again. I think all of us think we could, but especially if you're a competitive person, if you're an entrepreneur, you're not just going to be able to sit there and do nothing. So that was really the first premise. And then as time started to go on, and I found out it wasn't just happening to me, because originally I thought maybe they just didn't like Dylan, which I don't know why you wouldn't like me. I seem like a likable guy, but maybe they didn't like me. So, I thought maybe they just targeted me. They didn't do it to me. Well, then we started to find out that they were doing it to everyone. This was systematic fraud with the LTL pricing, with how they were doing the insurance, the bad debt fund, stealing customers, and even things that we found out recently. Well, now I knew this was a systematic problem. It wasn't just that they didn't like Dylan, that I was a little, brash, or that, I spoke out against them, or I was willing to expose them. This was a systematic fraud. They were making hundreds of millions of dollars over a 6 to 7 time year period that is illegitimate and that's illegal. And then why it also became important to me, I knew they wanted to IPO. And Bloomberg Business came out with an article last May that they had hired JP Morgan Chase to help them through the IPO process, because you got to do stuff with the SEC, et cetera. So now I'm like, okay, well, they're going to try to defraud the American public, because if they made hundreds of millions of dollars illegitimately by this scheme they had employed, and then you want to IPO, well, why are you trying to make hundreds of millions of dollars illegitimately over a 6 to 7 year time period? To up your EBITDA, to juice the numbers. And if you're going to juice the numbers and make your company look more profitable, when you go IPO and sell those stocks, well, now you're lying to the American public. So this isn't just a Dylan issue. This isn't just a Freight Essentials issue. This isn't just an agent issue. You are now trying to defraud the American public. And so that's why I decided that, well, for one, of course, this is about the money and what we should have been able to make. But I got to let people know, because if they were going to IPO, don't invest in their IPO because of what we have found out. And then 2, this was happening to all the other agents. And then I started talking to other agents at, Armstrong or Priority One or all the other agent programs. Maybe some of them are good, some of them are bad, but they all start saying the same stuff. And then I start talking to other people who work for LTL carriers and who work for the C.H. Robinson. And they were saying similar stuff. I'm like, okay, well, this is a systematic issue with the system of the logistics industry. There's no transparency. And if you want to become an insurance broker or real estate agent, or you want to sell financials like 401ks, et cetera, that I have buddies do, there's all these rules, there's these regulations. You have to take tests, you have to have certifications, you have to be in the office so many days a week. Yeah. The logistics industry, supply chain, which procurement, which you focus on, is one of the most important things in the entire world. It's a worldwide deal. Everything we touch, feel, wear, eat, have in your home, your car, it was all put through the supply chain 5, 10, 15, 20 times. So that's when it really became evident to me, or paramount, that I need to start speaking about this, because this isn't just affecting me. And as I've been on multiple podcasts recently, everyone's like, I really appreciate that you're willing to speak out against this, because no one's ever been willing to publicly go against the grain, against these multiple billion-dollar companies in the industry. Yeah. And so really, to answer your question, there's 2 things. The money that they owe me needs to be paid. And after we filed the RICO lawsuit, that night they called our attorneys and tried to settle with us. And it was an offensive offer, to say the least. And so I told them no. If they want to come with a respectable offer, we can have a conversation. So you can right your wrong there, do the right thing. And it would probably be smart of them if they were intelligent individuals, because the more that keeps being talked about this, the more that's just exposed. I mean, Kelly, last week we found out more stuff that has more fraud all over it that I won't get into yet. But we're talking about more fraud that could be $100+ million that we found out about after talking to a gentleman. And so the more they keep letting this perpetuate, I don't think they realize the magnitude of this situation, because it's pretty crazy. They might, Worldwide Express has been around for like 25 years or, more or less, but they've never had someone take them this deep in a lawsuit. TQL has been sued for $200 million for employment misclassification. C.H. Robinson's been sued. I talked to one of the highest up people, I won't name the company, who has an agent program, one of the biggest agent programs, one of their largest competitors. And he said, Dylan, if you were coming against us with the type of guy you are, the personality that you have, you're fighting for transparency, we would have settled with you in a second. Because what you're saying, when you look at a logistics company, if you've ever seen the documentary Too Big to Fail or Enron, they were a brokerage of energy. Well, they don't own any assets. Well, same thing with Worldwide Express or any of these brokerages. You own no assets. So your reputation and your company name is really all you have. And so the longer that I keep talking about the truth, about how things are not happening, fraud is being committed, there's no transparency, that's going to continue to affect them. And this gentleman said, I don't understand why they're not settling with you and why they're doing motions to seal. It just makes them look guilty. If they already don't look guilty, they're looking more guilty. And so those are really the two outcomes that I hope to have. We get paid the money that we were legitimately supposed to be paid. And in the meantime, in the process, I can continue to speak out publicly and bring awareness. And as I talked about in the Freight Caviar, start asking yourself, if you're an agent, is who I'm working with actually a good partner? Do they have my best interest in mind? You brought up the point earlier about having system access to your data information. So who owns customers versus who technically has access to that customer information. And then do they wrongfully use that information to sell against you with a competing brand? In this case, yes. So those are really the two main components that we want to get out of this. And I think one of which is going very well so far. We're bringing about hopefully a lot of change. A lot of people are talking about it. And the other one has yet to happen, and it will at some point.
Yeah. Now, I do think there's, obviously this is interesting because in the freight industry, the agent model is used all over the place, right? Different types of structures. Like you said, some are good, some are bad, some are recognizable names, some are not. And so there's an interest there. But I do also think, as somebody who's been an entrepreneur for a long time, that understands what you put on the line when you work for yourself to provide for your family, this is a lot that you're carrying. I think you've taken on the risk, right? You're being out there, you're erring on the side of transparency. You do have good legal advice. You're walking through this process. But how are you carrying the weight, the energy draw of these ongoing legal proceedings, of all of the public outreach you're trying to do, sort of personally and professionally? How are you carrying on with this on top of all of the other things that life and work are going to throw at you?
Yeah, no, 100%. I was on the Lombard podcast the other day with Mike. And, he titled it, I thought it was a great title, The Most Dangerous Man in Freight. And so I thought that was a great title. But no, it's a fair question. It has not been easy. But if anything, it's been a motivating factor. Obviously, you talked about your livelihood, your family, etc. One of the biggest motivating factors for me, honestly, is I have a 3-year-old daughter. And at the time this all happened, she was 1.5. When they terminated me illegitimately, I was actually in Madrid, Spain, with my daughter at the Natural History Museum. I get the email that we got terminated, and so I'll never forget that till the day I die. And, for me, I'm someone, I've said before, how I try to live my life as a moral, ethical individual, believing in God, etc., that God has a plan for you and you're never going to have anything put on your plate that you can't handle. But for me, that's really one of the biggest driving factors is, I have to be able to show her, and right now she doesn't understand, which is, probably better off, but when she does, and when she looks back, when I can tell her about this, that I wasn't someone who was willing to just keep having this perpetual thing keep happening, that, with my last name and how we act as a family, if something happens, then you have to bring about that change. I think really for me, that got instilled upon me from a child. And then ultimately, like when I played college football, and you have your last name and you're playing in front of hundreds of thousands of people on ESPN, you're representing your family's name. And so for me, I think that's one of the biggest driving factors, to be honest with you, is that when she can realize what happens, that, I am proud to be able to tell her and she is proud of me and vice versa. And then two, that, also that I knew I was doing this for other people. It's not just about myself. It's about, the entire agent community, the entire W-2 force, so many people who are being affected by this. But it also was about that I didn't have a choice. Of course, I had people tell me in my inner circle, and I kicked them out of my inner circle. So my inner circle got a little smaller. Dylan, you don't want to go against a $5 million company. They're just going to, crush you with legal fees. It's going to be death by legal fees. You're not going to be able to do it. You just had a company that was doing $30-40 million that was essentially stripped from you. So at that point, I had one of two decisions. Either I fight this head on or I go lay down and die. And I think they thought I was going to go lay down and die. And luckily, when we were making, good amounts of money, I was smart. I have a finance background. I invested the money. And I ultimately think our defendants, Joel Klum, Charlene York, Tom Medine, they spent some time around us. I think they thought we were blowing money, traveling to Europe, buying the designer things, buying cars, whatever. And of course that we did do those things and enjoyed ourselves a little bit. But that was a small percentage of my income. And so with that, I was able to start affording these legal fees. And then also we continue to rebuild the business. And so they thought that, what we haven't talked about, when they terminated me, they owed me like $1.4 million in my commissions, which they never paid to me. So there was a clause in the contract that they could hold that for 120 days and reconcile the books.
Yeah.
Well, after 120 days, which was August 1st, 2023, day after my birthday. So I thought I was going to get this great birthday present, September 30th. I'm going to get my $1.4 million I'm owed. Next day, they send us a letter. I think they were actually a few days late, and said that, no, we're not going to pay that to you. You actually owe us money, which was not true. So, I think they thought that they could bleed us out, or we would be so desperate we come to them and, oh, please, good sir, give me my money. I'll sign it, non-disclosure, and we won't ever talk about this again. They didn't expect this to happen. I can guarantee you of that. That's why they felt so comfortable and confident, which was Charlene York's favorite words, that she felt confident and comfortable in her contract and how she was treating us, and, the legalese, which there was no legalese behind what she thought. And she didn't understand the agent model. And so that was kind of number one. And then number two, it gave me the biggest drive to go build my current company, because we had 25 employees, and my business partner, Tosh, and I said when it happened, I'm not going to go terminate my entire office because these people decided to do bad things, because I'm putting food on the table for those 25 families, which I take very seriously. Yeah. So you've now attacked me, you've attacked my business, you have attacked my daughter, you've attacked my employees, and so now I need to go grow a business as fast as humanly possible, which I grew a $40 million business in 3.5 years. Well, I can do it again. And I think they doubted that. They tried to say that I was seemingly successful in one of their legal filings at one point, which I got a kick out of. It really pissed me off. That I'm seemingly successful. So I guess my seemingly successful self, that I just got lucky, because I'm a good looking dude who can talk. I don't know what their thought process was. But I went and built a $20 million business in 10 months. And so I literally, like I said, my daughter's one of my biggest driving factors. There was weeks and months where I hardly saw her, because I went on the road. I went to all these conferences. I went booth to booth. I shook hands. I met CEOs, told them my story, told them, my unique selling propositions of why you should work with me in freight versus work with someone else. And we were able to build the business, and still building and growing to this day. We're having to, hire more people through all of this. It's been very interesting. People want to work for someone who's transparent. And I think there's almost no one transparent in the freight industry. And like I said, I'm sure there's some good actors, but most of them, I think, are bad apples. People reaching out to me, hey, I'd really like to work for you, whether it's W-2 or agent or a mixture of whatever it may be. Are you hiring right now? I have a book of business, X, Y, and Z. And so it's been a very interesting turn of events. And like I said, God always has a plan for you. But that's kind of, where we've been, and, what my driving factor was, as you mentioned, to try to personally and professionally make it through this, and I talked about it on Mike's podcast with Lombard, because he's big into fitness. I'm big into fitness. Ultimately, I have loved working out since the time I was like 12. It started for sports, but for me, I know, okay, whatever I got to put up with through the day, I can go for a run, or I can go do cardio, or I can go to the gym and really blow off some steam. And so for me, that's kind of like, my sanctuary or my temple, or whatever you want to call it, where I can go, and that's an hour or 2 hours I can focus on myself. No matter how good or bad the day was, I still got to show up. And, there's plenty of days you don't feel like showing up. And I think that's why This is a great, sector for people because it teaches you a lot of lessons, whether you feel like doing it or not. The work needs to be done. And so that's been a good mental thing for me, is when you have those hard days. I remember the day that we got terminated over in Madrid, Spain. I went and found some random gym. Like, I got to go work out, so it's like, that's what's been able to help get me through it personally, professionally, family, all that kind of stuff.
And you have been incredibly transparent. I think you mentioned all of us that host shows, if not our first question, then our second is, wait, help me understand exactly why you're willing to talk about this, because that's not what we're used to finding.
Yes.
I think, Dylan, I appreciate, obviously, the time you've put in up to date. There's a lot of content out there. I would recommend people check out any of the other shows that you've been on. We've all sort of captured different pieces of this and gotten different parts of the story. But if you were to make a recommendation as to the best way for people to stay up to date on what's happening with your case, how the story is progressing, what is the best way for people to stay posted?
Yeah, so of course you can get online, like on the court dockets, but some people are not going to understand, the legalese and the filings, and some of the sites you got to have passwords to. But really, any new thing that's coming out, I'm posting to my LinkedIn. Any of the podcasts I'm on, as things are dropping, as articles are being written, I try to put it all on there. So that's where I'm most active. I have Instagram, but I try to keep that more personal and private and protected. So really, the best way, if you want to get a hold of me, is on LinkedIn. It's just Dylan Admire. You can look up Freight Essentials. And so, you can reach out to me if you have questions, if other agents see this or other people have questions about, what should they be looking for in a business partner, or, if they're having issues in their business, whether it's hiring people, firing people, whatever it may be. I feel like I've had a good experience with all of it, and it's a continued learning experience. I think if anyone thinks that they know it all, you're in the wrong place. You're too narcissistic to think that, you know it all, you've arrived. So for me, it's just a continued learning experience. That's why I said the legal thing has actually honestly been a very enlightening experience. It's been a very expensive experience, but it's been very enlightening. I joke, I feel like I've gone to law school, and obviously there's a lot I don't still know, but I think as a young business owner, I'm 32 years old right now. I think it's very important, and most people, even our defendants in this case, who are a multi-billion-dollar company, I don't think they truly understand the legal system and the legalese and the implications of what they're going against someone like myself who has so much evidence. Because if I was in their shoes, knowing what I know now, I'd be like, I don't want any part of this. What do we owe you? How much did we wrong you? Why are you upset? Let's settle this and let's go away. And so for me as a business owner, because, I plan to still continue in freight. We're growing a great company. I own gyms. I want to own more gyms. There's lots of stuff I want to do, lots of passions I have. Having that legal knowledge, having that legal background, I think is so ultimately important. If you're hiring employees, if you're getting into contracts, if you're looking at renting buildings, if you're looking at buying stuff, you have to live and die by contracts, unfortunately. And too many people, including myself, years ago, had no idea what they're reading. They're just blindly signing things, and they don't realize the legal ramifications. And, my business partner, Tasha, I said she, had a legal background before this, how one word can change a contract. Literally, one or two words can completely flip it on its head. And those are things, I think in high school, there should be like a class about the legal system and reading contracts and, finances and all those types of things, because ultimately that you hear it all too often, whether it's employees or people who are starting companies. I have one buddy I know, he was a part of like 2 or 3 startup companies, and, got screwed several different times because he didn't read the contract. And it's a sad story, but unfortunately, you have people who will prey on people like that. Like I said, I think a lot of these agent programs prey on W-2 people. They sell them this pipe dream, and the W-2 people who are leaving a C.H. Robinson or a TQL, who had to go clock into an office and they had to miss their kid's soccer game or whatever. The agent model seems like this amazing thing. And so they were so happy of, okay, I can 3 or 4X my salary. I can work for myself. Maybe I hire 1 or 2 VAs, virtual assistants, and so it's this really great thing. And it also is what perpetuates the issue of why no one's willing to talk about it. Because if someone's making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 being an agent, are they willing to risk that when maybe they were making 70, 80K at one point as a W-2 employee, and now, like you said, they've been working for themselves, so they believe they're an entrepreneur. And I'm not saying they're not, but depending on the agent model you're in, you might be gotten sold that you're an entrepreneur, and that they would really go take your book of business from you at a snap of a finger. And so that's, vastly important and also part of the message. So, I said, if anyone wants to reach out, they have questions, have had lots of people, not just people from Global Transit Worldwide, all sorts of people, from drivers to dispatchers to, people overseas who are VAs, like recruiting firms. All sorts of people have reached out. But I think, LinkedIn's probably the best. And I'll be on multiple more podcasts. I'm doing Matthew Leffler's next week and a few other big ones. So I can't wait for, everyone to see this and, continue. So we'll have the hearing next Friday on that Rule 76A. And ultimately, if we are successful, which I think my legal team's going to do a great job, they have all the arguments ready. They were actually ready a few weeks ago for this, but the defendants tried to play some games. So here we are. It'll be February 7th. It's going to be the day of transparency. So that's what we got coming up.
Awesome. Well, Dylan, thank you for being here to tell this audience your story. You're definitely going to keep me up to date. And then as news is available, we will have you back on to hopefully share news with everybody about how things have proceeded so that we can all continue to learn from the experience that you're having. I so appreciate you being with me.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I hope your audience enjoys, and we'll be back soon.